Welcome back into CyHawk Talk. I let Ben come back on the show for this episode. I did my preview episode with Christian McCollum of. We're gonna have to restart because I can't. I blanked on the name of this publication for a second there.
You're good.
Welcome back to CyHawk Talk here on a Wednesday. I let Ben come back on the show after my one-on-one sit-down interview with Christian McCollum of Minuteman Command. You can go check out that show. It's up on all of our platforms and on QCtimes.com. Great insight on UMass, and I'll be referencing it a couple of times later in the show. But yeah, I just decided to let Ben, the real ball knower of CyHawk Talk, back on the show to maybe drop some knowledge my way on what Iowa State is looking at down in Jonesboro, Arkansas, against the Red Wolves of Arkansas State this week. Ben, how are you doing here on a Wednesday?
Ethan, I must say, it is so nice to see your face back on the show after you came in last week with the bag on your head. Maybe in Cyhawk, I think we both kind of had a little bit more of an idea of what to expect in that game, and maybe we can keep our faces out in the bags off of our head in the future.
I had more data, but I still haven't ponied up on that meal I owe you yet. So I'll have to get that. Probably Cyclone or Cyhawk basketball will be when I have to repay you for that. I had to get out of Ames real early. I had given a couple people some rides, so I'm not being the opposite of a stand-up guy. All right, I had some other obligations I needed to be a stand-up guy for first.
That's okay. I know you're good for it.
Let's go ahead and dive right into the Iowa State matchup. Take me through the number one thing you're looking at when Iowa State top 15 team is going on the road to a group of five opponent.
Ethan, I think this is going to be a measuring stick for how far Iowa State's football program has come since the legendary, or should I say infamous, 2023 loss at Ohio. You know, the Cyclones are going on the road to another group of five opponent, but I do feel like this team is in such a different situation as it was back in 2023 when Rocco Becht was making his third career start. The Cyclone offense couldn't get much of anything going. A missed field goal, you know, that quite was so close. What was also a factor in that kind of ugly game that the Cyclones ended up losing. So I'm curious to see this time around when the Cyclones go on the road to a group of five opponent. You know, is this a situation where they're going to be able to dominate Arkansas State like they should? Are they going to have the maturity, the mental toughness, the discipline to go out there and handle their business? And I do think they're going to be able to. I don't think we're going to have a repeat of a fan calling for Campbell in his job. I don't think there's going to be any hot seat allegations after this game in Jonesboro.
You were covering Oklahoma State that year that Iowa State lost to Ohio. And then Iowa State, I believe, came back and beat the Pokes the next weekend after that loss. Do you remember what your reaction was to like, dang, I thought we had, I thought the Cowboys could have got this one against a team that just lost to a group of five team. They also lost the Cyhawk game that year. So that they were a two-loss team at that point early in the season. What do you remember was your perspective as the opposing media coming out of that game?
It's so funny you bring that up because I was kind of thinking back on that game. As our readers and listeners might know, I covered Oklahoma State at the time, and that was my first time in Jack Trice Stadium for that game. I came in fully expecting the Cowboys to handle business against Iowa State, which was at the time with an unproven quarterback. We really didn't know a whole lot about Rocco Becht. We didn't really know a whole lot about Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. And you know, in that game, Cyclone fans are going to remember Rocco and Jalen and Jaden were awesome. I came away from that game thinking, man, Iowa State has some receivers. And as I've gotten on the Iowa State beat and been around this team, you hear so much about that Ohio game getting referenced as a true turning point where Rocco Becht was throwing up in the locker room. He was sick, you know, but he stayed out there for his guys. He gutted through it. And Matt Campbell tells us, you know, you have to find the players you lose with before you find the players you win with. And that Ohio game is certainly one that gets referenced so often as kind of the turning point where maybe we saw a little bit of Rocco emerge, a little bit of Jalen, a little bit of Jaden lay that foundation for the awesome 2024 season and great start to 2025 we see now.
You might not have been bought in on Rocco, and he might have been unproven to the masses, but I had already said take the training wheels off this guy, unleash Rocco. So there was one loud or quiet, but loud to myself voice saying Rocco Becht is the guy. So I just gotta, because I'm a known certified not ball knower. I have my moments. I just want to get that out there. But now that I've stroked my own ego a little bit here, what's your number two thing that you're looking for this weekend?
Well, you're absolutely right that you've been beating that drum forever on this show. And go back in the Quad City Times and go read it because it's there. Ethan Petrick's byline is there. But the second thing I'm looking for in this Arkansas State game is, can Iowa State's defense come up with a stop after the offense scores? Guys, there's a really weird trend that John Haycock, the defensive coordinator, brought up with us this season that Cyclone fans have probably picked up on. Um, 5 times this year, after the Cyclone offense has scored a touchdown, the defense has allowed a touchdown. Every single touchdown has been responded to with a touchdown um, in Power Four games, in the Kansas State game, in the Iowa game. And against Arkansas State, in the middle of those two things, there was actually a response from the Cyclones' first touchdown drive, but then they ended up scoring a bunch of touchdowns, and it kind of skewed the statistic. But in all these Power Five games against Iowa and against Kansas State, the defense hasn't gotten any what TJ Otzelberger and the basketball team would probably call a kill. At Hilton Coliseum, you hear the students chanting "kill, kill, kill" for the 3 consecutive stops on defense. And there's a reason I think people chant that, because coaches know that those are so big. Those are ways to really damage the confidence and the momentum of your opponent, is to go out and score a touchdown and then come back and get a stop. Now, I can't really tell you why it's happening. It's just kind of an odd statistic anomaly. I really do think that will even out over the course of a 12, 13 game season. But for right now, you'd really like to see the Cyclones kind of figure whatever that is out. And I don't think it's an effort problem. It's not like they're not trying. But it would certainly be a place for them to get some timely stops on Saturday.
Well, I think that they might just have that opportunity this Saturday based on what your next headline is, because it's going to be a blowout when you start talking about the guys who might not see the field to start the game, but might see the field in mop-up duty. So take me through your number three thing you're looking for this weekend in a potential blowout.
For sure, Ethan. I'm looking at the backup running back situation. You're exactly right. I do think this is going to be a game where the Cyclones get out in front and are able to run and showcase the ball. And the reason for that is Arkansas State is a bottom 5 team in terms of rush yards allowed. The Razorbacks last week ran all over Arkansas, and I expect that the Cyclones are going to be able to do the same. They're actually probably going to get Trevor Bohr back, the offensive lineman who's been missing with an illness since the start of the season. So maybe that could help him out a little bit. And ideally, the Cyclones are getting a chance to rest Carson Hansen, getting a chance to rest Abu Sama as those guys go into a bye week. And maybe you look at it as an extended bye week, a chance to really get those guys freshened up for a brutal Big 12 play. So maybe it's a Dylan Lee game. I'm also curious if Aiden Flora, who's been operating as the Cyclones' primary return man, will get some snaps at running back. He's going to be back from injury, probably, it sounds like, according to Campbell, and maybe he gets some work operating in there with the reserve running backs.
What about River Peppers? Is there any talk about him potentially getting some snaps this weekend?
Not that I've seen, man. We walked right by River on the field at Jack Trice Stadium. The hero of spring ball and fall camp, River Peppers, man. Matt Campbell, he was hyping that guy up. And with a name that fun to say, how could you not? But maybe we will see a little bit of River. I'm not too sure on that.
I would like to also push back, as looking at the Iowa game, didn't necessarily run wild. I think there was 103 total rushing yards from the Cyclones in that one. Is there any, thought to maybe, leaving a Carson Hansen or an Abu Sama in the game a little bit longer to maybe get a little bit more of a rhythm, get ready to go for Big 12 play, knowing that you have that bye week the next week, and any extra exertion, any nicks will have their time to heal. Do you think that there's any sense that they might do that this weekend instead?
I don't think there's a whole lot of sense in doing that, Ethan, and that's just a credit to what we know Iowa's run defense is and has been over the course of a long stretch of years now. not many people find a whole lot of success running against that brick wall. And we've seen Carson Hansen and Abu Sama both have awesome games. It's not a matter of, them kind of relearning how to do that or getting fresh. I have confidence that both of those guys, will be able to hit the ground running, pardon the pun, in Big 12 play.
Look at Ben saying some nice things about the Hawkeyes, hyping them up a little bit. We'll see if I do the same in what I'm looking for Iowa's matchup with UMass right after this.
Your kick is good.
Welcome back to CyHawk Talk here on a Wednesday, previewing Iowa State's matchup with Arkansas State. Already did that, so you might want to rewind if you haven't listened to it already. Now we're looking at UMass, Iowa. Iowa gets a chance to bounce back from a 16-13 loss to Iowa State last weekend in Ames in their final game before the start of Big Ten conference play. And you look at the schedule, and it feels like it might be a get-right game, particularly when you look at the fact that UMass lost to FCS Bryant last week at home, and Bryant, they went 2-10 last year. This is an FCS team. This is not a great game to lose early in the season. First year of a new head coach at home. According to Christian McCollum, who I spoke to this morning from Minuteman Command, it's been dubbed the most disappointing loss in UMass football history. So maybe both teams looking to get right, looking to get some things going this weekend a little bit maybe.
How about that, man? I mean, I heard on the radio, it didn't feel like the U Albany, like Kinnick had seen many teams worse than U Albany. You think maybe that's the case?
I don't know. Bryant plays in the same league as U Albany, so they both did pretty poor last year, but U Albany had a better record. So it's possible that this might be the worst team that comes to Kinnick this season. We'll see. It, it, I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, but it's certainly not setting up. The resume doesn't really do great things. Speak glowingly of the Minutemen, that's for sure. And that's why I'll get into my first headline here, and or the first thing I'm looking for, which is the stoppable force meets the movable object. Iowa's got the second worst passing attack in the country right now, but UMass has the 11th worst pass defense in the country. So if you're looking for a get-right game for that passing attack, that struggled through the first 2 weeks. This might be exactly what the doctor ordered. When I was talking to Christian, he said that's been the biggest disappointment this season. They thought it was going to be a strength. They've had a couple of injuries, but even when those guys were playing, it was still a disappointment in a huge loss to Temple and then in the loss to Bryant this weekend as well. So if you're looking at, it's like, how do we get things rolling? How do we get Gronowski in rhythm with his receivers? Get him to get live game chemistry with his receivers, get some easy throws after the debacle that was the U Albany game. Well, you play one of the worst pass defenses in the country, and especially looking at Iowa State as one of the best pass defenses in the country last year, it's gonna feel like open season. It might feel like the floodgates spring wide open. Added on top, we saw improvement from the passing game last week, as I said on Sunday. So this is just gonna probably be another step in that progression, in my opinion.
It would be incredible whiplash for everybody, I think, in the media if Mark Gronowski goes out there against a bottom pass defense, but say he goes 18 of 20 for, 295 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, we wouldn't know what to think at that point.
Yeah, it puts up a Rocco Beck stat line.
That's right.
And then my number 2 thing that I'm looking for, and I'm really wanting to dial in on the early play calling. I felt Iowa went really vanilla early against Iowa State, and that had a role in the early 3-and-outs, and then the 6-play drive that gained -1 yard. I felt like the play calling was really vanilla. It felt run pass. You go back and look at the play-by-play, it wasn't run pass. But that's what it felt like, and that's what everyone said after the game. It's like, yeah, you just wouldn't run pass. And it's like, no, but yes, basically, essentially, that's all you accomplished. And you put Gronowski in situations where he was in obvious passing situations on third down because the run game wasn't working against Iowa State particularly early. It got going in the second half a little bit, but you look at that first drive and Gronowski's throwing on 3rd and 7. It's like, geez, this guy was uncomfortable last weekend. Now he's in a hostile environment. You got him in an obvious passing situation on the first drive of the game. All the pressure's on him. It's been mounting all week. And now Iowa State can pin their ears back in the pass rush and knows on the backside of the defense that he's going to pass. And then what do? You throw a pass short of the sticks and you punt. And it's like, oh man, the avalanche is right back on. I didn't silence any of the haters with that drive. Go out and do the exact same thing on the next drive. Once again, haters not silenced. Do it again on the third drive. Gee, fourth drive, pick. Like, oh man, you couldn't have scripted a worse 4 drives to start the game for Iowa last week. So I'm really curious about what the play calling is going to look like to get Gronowski in a rhythm, get him comfortable while still establishing the run game, because that was a huge issue against Iowa State. You just couldn't get the ground game going early at all.
This brings up a question I was meaning to ask you, Ethan. You posted the TikTok, and by the way, if you're not following CyHawk Talk on TikTok, man, that's a tongue twister. But I don't know what you're doing. You should go check it out. We're building that page. Um, Almost 150 comments from angry Iowa fans under your video of Kirk Ferentz's opening statement. I was curious if you have a feel for where was most of the frustration directed at the Iowa offense? Was it with Tim Lester in the play calling or Coach Ferentz or Gronowski? Where did you feel like it was directed?
Well, shortly before we started recording this, I did a radio program in Cedar Falls with Cole Baird, 1650 The Fan, Cole and Company. You can go check out their podcast to hear some of my takes on Iowa. But he asked me a question. He said, "Does it feel like Kirk Ferentz has his thumb on the offense?" And I think that's kind of the perception a lot of fans have, and why a lot of the blame goes Kirk's way. It's because they feel like no matter who they bring in as an offensive coordinator, Ferentz is going to try and dictate some of the things that they do. I don't get the sense that that is the case at all. I feel like Tim Lester does have the leeway and the liberty to do what he pleases with the offense. I don't think we would have saw slow mesh on Saturday if Ferentz had his thumb on the offense. I don't think we would have seen slow mesh under Brian Ferentz. So I think that Tim Lester's given plenty of leash to do what he pleases. We see a lot of motion. That's something that Tim Lester brought in. They were one of the lowest motioning teams in the country before Lester. We see a ton of it. It seems like they motion on every play. So Kirk gets a lot of the blame. I feel like it's a little bit miscast. I think that the blame pie is shared pretty equally between Ferentz, Lester, the play calling, wide receivers unable to get separation when they need to, Gronowski maybe not seeing the field as well as he needs to, Gronowski's nerves. I think all of that is just an equal combination of blame in that sector.
Gotcha. Campbell always tells us that the head coach and the quarterback get way too much credit when things are going good and way too much blame when things are going bad. I think you're right that blame pie is normally a little bit more evenly sliced than most fans would like to think. Now, if you did get any, offensive conclusions from Cyhawk, it might have been in the Iowa running game, which had some interesting kind of feel to it in that Cyhawk game.
You would certainly think so, as Jazz Patterson looked like far and away the best running back, most efficient and effective running back against the Cyclones. But then the depth chart comes out on Saturday, and it's the exact same or it comes out on Monday, and it's the exact same as it was on Saturday. TJ Washington leads the pack. Below him, Xavier Williams, and then or Jazz Patterson. And you're sitting there thinking, it's like, man, what are you guys seeing from TJ Washington that we're not seeing? He didn't look amazing against against U Albany. All the running backs looked good, but of the five that played, and let's just take Nathan McNeil out because he got, I think, 3 carries. Kamari Moulton, even his 3 carries looked really good, but TJ Washington wasn't the most effective of the 4 that played against U Albany. Was certainly not the most effective against Iowa State. I think he had 1.6 yards per carry and just didn't seem to be able to hit the hole hard like he needed to, like Jazz was. I think I heard one reporter refer to Washington's running style on Saturday as timid, and that fits. And so I'm really curious to see if the rotation stacks up the way I would expect it to, which would be how we saw it on Saturday. As Jazz Patterson looks like the most experienced, most efficient runner, and then they're trying to get these other guys involved and get them comfortable and clicking a little bit before Big Ten play, because you're going to need more than just one guy, especially with Kamari Moulton already banged up. Whenever he comes back, it's not like he's going to be back to 100%, right? You're going to be nursing that injury all year, and you're going to be concerned about that re-injury all year. So you're going to need more than Kamari when he comes back, more than Jazz Patterson. So you need these other 2 guys to get rolling. I'm just curious to see if we see maybe Patterson get a little bit more of a share of that backfield after a strong performance against Iowa State.
Wasn't this all less confusing when Caleb Johnson was back there?
Oh man, like I said, I think last week on Sunday even, Caleb Johnson would have changed that game dramatically. Kamari Moulton, I feel like would have changed that game dramatically, but Caleb Johnson would have completely changed that game because that dude could run. Let me tell you what. We'll go ahead and get into our Sunday's headlines today, right after this. All right, back here on CyHawk Talk for Sunday's headlines today. I went first last week, so I'm going to surprise Ben, give him the floor to go through his three headlines that he expects to see on Sunday following Iowa State's matchup with Arkansas State.
Well, that's just great because my first headline is the best one. We're going to write, "You're on the cold seat, Campbell." Remember back to the Ohio game in 2023 when a fan told Matt Campbell he was on the hot seat. It's cooled significantly from that very moment. Iowa State's been on kind of an incredible run under the leadership of Campbell and Rocco Becht, and they're winning all of these close games that they had been losing. It's just crazy to think that Matt Campbell, who just got an extension through 2032 as a cornerstone foundation of Iowa State football, Iowa State University, was once considered on the hot seat by maybe a rogue fan. I don't know if he was talking for all of Iowa State fans, but I think Iowa State's going to win comfortably, illustrating the coolness of Matt Campbell's seat. My next headline, Ethan, is going to be resting easy. This kind of feels like if the Cyclones can get through this final game, this 4 game stretch where Campbell's talked it up and talked about the difficulties of going to Arkansas State, going to Ireland, coming back to play a top 5 FCS team in South Dakota. If they can get through this game into their bye, I think they'll be resting easy based on a very strong first month of the season. They'll be able to kind of look back and look at the rest of the Big 12 kind of, devouring itself or changing as what we think. And, you look at Iowa State as, hey, this is one of the teams that we thought was going to be pretty good entering the season, and they've proven to do so. So if the Cyclones can get through this game unscathed, which I think will be the case, then they'll be resting easy ahead of their first bye week, which they get, of course, because of that Ireland trip. And I don't think it's gonna take any sort of pop pass to Gabe Burkle one-handed catch, or I don't think Cal Conrarty's gonna have to come out there and kick a 54-yard field goal to win this one. I think it's no tricks, no sweat for Iowa State as my last headline. This is going to be a ground and pound game. We talked about that earlier in the show, Ethan, where they're going to be able to exploit a bottom 5 run game for a run defense for Arkansas State. I mean, heck, Jalen Rayner, Arkansas State's quarterback, was pretty good in all of his games outside of the Iowa State game, but this defense terrorized him last year. He was 5 for 16 passing with 2 interceptions. Now that makes Mark Gronowski sound like Tom Brady. So I don't think Jalen Rayner is going to be super happy to see this Cyclone defense, and I think it's going to be a fairly straightforward game plan to go win this one.
Sounds like another good Saturday to be a Cyclone fan. I think it might be a pretty good Saturday to be a Hawkeye fan as well, getting into my headlines. And number one's going to be A New Hope. I think you're going to see Mark Gronowski look comfortable, look like he's got some chemistry with his wide receivers. We might see a couple of deep shots, especially with the media asking everyone so many questions about why you can't throw the ball deep. And you're going to come away from the game, you're going to look at Gronowski's stat line, and you're like, hey, this guy can throw the ball. He can throw the ball pretty well. Maybe that's why that idiot on CyHawk Talk predicted him to throw for 3,000 yards going into the season. And so I think there'll be a renewed hope, a new hope in the fan base that this passing attack can get on track. This season is not lost. And then I think you're going to have a second emotion right after that hope starts to manifest a little bit. And it's going to be your number 2 headline, which is more, 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 referencing the Kylo Ren meme where he's just going crazy in the attack walker in episode 8 of Star Wars. I think you're just going to want to see more of what you got on Saturday. You're going to want to see more of that passing attack. It's going to feel therapeutic to see the Hawkeyes pass the ball as effectively as they're going to in my prediction here. And I think it's going to look even better, feel even better than that week one game did last year against Illinois State, where Cade McNamara threw for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he had people chanting Heisman, Heisman, Heisman as he ran off the field. So I think it's going to feel even better because they started slow in that game. I think you're going to see the Hawkeyes exercise that slow start demon that they've been struggling with this year, and it's going to be pretty good from start to finish, and you're going to feel really good coming out of the stadium. And then 2 days later, number 3 headline, reality strikes back. I think you're going to go, wait a minute, that was one of the worst pass defenses in the country, and it's only going to get a lot harder from here. So maybe we should temper our expectations a little bit. At least we know it can be done now. We've got proof of life here in the passing attack. It's not flatlining anymore. We got a little bit of a heartbeat on the monitor, but it's still going to take a little bit of work, and it's not going to be smooth sailing from here. There might still be some hiccups. So those will be my 3 headlines. Ben, I think I got this one this week. What do you think?
Well, I'll give you this. What you might lack some weeks in ball knowledge, you make up for in Star Wars knowledge. I'm impressed.
Thank you. I probably should have spent more time watching football and less time watching Star Wars when I was a little kid. But that'll do it for CyHawk Talk this week on a Wednesday. We'll be back on Sunday for our Sunday Rewind show, see how good our predictions are, and see if maybe my status as a ball knower goes a little bit up this week, or if I just take a nosedive crater back down to irrelevant bag status. You'll see right away on the show next week. Thanks for watching.